You don't get it. The money doesn't matter anymore. The Jaeger grill doesn't matter anymore. Nothing matters anymore.
Oh, I'm fine. It's just that life is pointless and nothing matters, and I'm always tired.
What's the point?
But seriously, what is the point? What are we even doing here? Face it, you've had a similar thought. Probably more than once. We all have. Maybe it hit you after you failed. Hard. Maybe you've been doom scrolling for hours, sucked into the algorithm's abyss. Or maybe you're just tired of pretending things make sense. And so it starts. The jokes, the memes. Nothing matters. We're all NPCs. Just vibe until you die. We get it. Caring about stuff isn't cool. But here's the thing. The version of nihilism you see online, the one dressed up in TikToks and sarcasm, masquerading as a deep, edgy worldview, that's not Nietzsche, that's not philosophy, that's a damn ticking time bomb. Listen, I'm not here to preach right and wrong. I sure as hell am not claiming I've unlocked life's big answers. And, believe it or not, I'm not making this video to throw shade. The point behind this video is to show how this new lens through which some are viewing the world is, quite literally, deadly, and to break down how and why it has become so powerful so quickly. So, let's cut the fluff and dive in. Because before we can talk about why modern nihilism sucks, we need to understand where it actually came from and what nihilism really means. Without the boring history lesson. All right, let's rewind. Before nihilism was a meme, before it was a TikTok trend, before Gen Z made it a punchline, it was a philosophical nuke. And Friedrich Nietzsche, although not the founder, he pressed launch. Picture this, 19th century Europe. Science is booming. Religion is dying. People are starting to realize the systems that once gave life meaning aren't holding up anymore. Nietzsche looked around and basically said, "Yo, God is dead." Not like literally, but metaphorically. We killed him. With science, with reason, with progress. What he meant was this. We stopped believing in the old rules. The moral structures, the cosmic purpose, the heaven-hell reward system. And we had nothing to replace it with. Enter nihilism. The belief that life has no inherent meaning, no objective value, no built-in purpose. And here's the twist. Nietzsche wasn't celebrating that. He wasn't like, cool, let's just give up. Nah, he was terrified. He saw nihilism as a void, a vacuum. And if we didn't fill it with something better, something we chose, built, and stood for, that emptiness would swallow everything. Here's a quote to store up in your noodle. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. See, nihilism wasn't the end of meaning. It was the demolition crew. Now the question was, what are you going to build in its place? So, when Nietzsche talked about nihilism, he wasn't encouraging you to just vibe and give up. He was warning you, if you don't create your own meaning, someone or something will do it for you. And history shows that rarely ends well. So, what happened? How did a raw, terrifying philosophy about rebuilding meaning turn into TikToks about vibing through the void? Somewhere along the way, nihilism got watered down, repackaged, marketed as cool. And while Nietzsche is rolling in his grave, millions of kids and young adults are being poisoned by a dangerous social trend. And just like any trend, there are psychological and emotional factors that allow it to flourish. And we will get to those in just a minute. Now, like I said earlier, I am not making this video as a way to throw shade at Gen Z or Gen A. Every generation had its version. For Gen Z, it might be this modern nihilism, but for millennials, it was existential dread. And before that, they had postmodern cynicism. The point is that every generation has its beliefs that they latch onto, and every previous generation thinks they are idiots for thinking it. This fact will never change. And it's a natural progression until it starts hurting the next generation. And if we are going to criticize the thoughts, feelings, and actions of the generation after us, we must carefully consider who raised them to think, feel, and act this way. The unfortunate truth is that Gen Z and even Gen A were dealt a hand that would make a card shark sweat. What they inherited wasn't a philosophy, it was a feeling of emptiness, of exhaustion, of being born into a collapsing system. where you're told to find meaning in the hustle and grind, culture, student debt, and broken politics. But what happens? When an entire generation comes to realize that the systems that they were taught to value were broken, well, they do their best to adapt. And in this case, many of them adopted nihilism, not as a philosophy, but as a shield. Because saying nothing matters gives you cover. You don't have to try if there's no point. You don't have to care if nothing's real. And you can't fail if you never play the game. It's not that people don't want meaning. It's that they're terrified they'll never be able to earn it, that they'll chase fulfillment forever and still feel empty. So, instead of risking that pain, they preemptively detach. And now we have social media influencers and self-proclaimed philosophers selling this idea. For the betterment of society? No, for clicks and likes. This isn't deep thinking. It's emotional apathy wrapped in irony and sold as wisdom. But here's the twist. The more you repeat it, the more you believe it. And the more you believe it, the harder it becomes to see a way out. That's not enlightenment. That's slow erosion. See, Nietzsche never feared nihilism itself. He feared what would happen if people chose to sleep on it, to let it rot them from the inside out. Because there are two paths, and which one you choose, that's everything. And while these are far from textbook explanations, I feel they encapsulate the true essence of what we are discussing. But I am sure that there are some of you watching that have much better explanations, and I would ask you to share your knowledge or your questions with us in the comments. All right, the first is active nihilism. This is the hard path. You look around, realize there's no preset meaning, no cosmic rulebook, no invisible scoreboard, and instead of folding, you build. You create purpose. You fight for your own values. You carve out your very own piece of history, even if it is only for the time you are here. The second, passive nihilism. The path we're watching so many people slide into. The slow surrender, the shrug, the constant chorus of "who cares?" It doesn't scream, it whispers. Skip that application. Don't bother asking them out. Sleep in, scroll. It's not like any of it matters. And at first it feels like relief, like peace, like you finally let go of all that pressure to succeed. But you didn't let go, you gave up. And the thing about giving up is, it doesn't stop the pain. It just makes you feel powerless to change it. Passive nihilism is often a rebranded form of depression. It's burnout dressed like enlightenment, and it's spreading fast. The stats are brutal. Anxiety and depression in Gen Z have skyrocketed. Suicide is now one of the leading causes of death for young people. And behind so many of those headlines is someone who thought, if life has no meaning, maybe mine doesn't either. That thought, it doesn't always result in someone not caring if they live, but sometimes it leads to them not trying to have a life. No goals, no relationships, no ambition, just scrolling, surviving, and slowly fading. And when you stack millions of those quiet collapses on top of each other, you don't just lose individuals, you lose generations. The world doesn't end with a bang. It ends with a timeline full of jokes about how pointless it all is, until the laughing subsides and reality sets in. So, if life has no built-in meaning, then meaning becomes something we create. And that's not just philosophy, it's reality. It's history. Take two names you've definitely heard, Gandhi and Hitler. Two men who walked very different paths. One stood for peace and justice, the other for power and destruction. And yet, both lived lives that influenced the entire world forever. Not because the universe told them what to do, but because they chose what to live for. They weren't born into meaning, they built it. And yes, their choices shaped the world, but so did the people around them. Their childhood friends, their families, their teachers, the conversations, the struggles, the pain, all played a role in crafting who they became, good or evil, meaningful or monstrous. Nobody does it alone. And here's where it gets real. Most of us won't be remembered like Gandhi or feared like Hitler, and that's okay. You're not here to be them. You're here to be you, to live your own version of meaning. And while you're doing that, while you're stumbling through your own purpose, you may say one thing, offer one moment of kindness, spark one idea in someone else that changes their entire trajectory. You might never know it, but you might be the reason someone chooses peace, or turns away from hate, or finally believes their life matters. That maybe it's worth sticking around for. We talk a lot about influencers today, but the most powerful influence usually isn't viral. It's invisible. It's you being intentional in a world that wants you numb. It's your effort, your presence, your honesty that ripples into places you'll never see. Meaning doesn't have to be massive, it just has to be real. And it starts with how you choose to show up, even when no one's watching. So, if we're not handed meaning, and we're not following someone else's, then what now? How do you rebuild from the ground up when everything still feels kind of pointless? You start with a question, a simple one. If ultimately nothing ever matters, what matters to me right now? You'd be surprised what shows up. Maybe you'd write a book, or start painting again, or take a walk without your phone. Maybe you'd reach out to someone you've been quietly worrying about. That's how it starts. Not with a master plan, but with a flicker of action in the dark. And here's a truth you won't hear in most motivational content. You don't need to feel good to do something good. You don't need to be inspired to show up. You don't even need hope. Just enough energy to take one step and be willing to look for hope. You build meaning by acting as if life matters until it starts to. Want a real mental experiment? Imagine this. Someone you admire deeply, maybe even someone famous. They were one decision away from giving up. And someone said something small, a word, a sentence, a tiny gesture of grace, and it shifted them. Now flip it. What if you're the person who gives that moment to someone else? What if the thing that saves someone isn't a TED Talk or a best-selling book, but a random Tuesday conversation with you? That's not fluff, that's reality. Influence surrounds us like oxygen, whether we mean to or not. So, what if you showed up today like your actions mattered, even if your brain says they don't? What if you spoke life into someone else before you figured out your own? That's not philosophy, that's legacy. If you've made it this far, first of all, thank you. That already says something about you. It means you're thinking, reflecting, searching, and that's rare. And look, if you still firmly believe in nihilism, that's okay, really. But I'd ask one thing. Be careful with your voice, because not everyone hearing you has the tools to interpret your full perspective. They might not hear your nuance. They might not get your context. Let me say this clearly. If someone around you says life has no meaning, please don't confuse that with them saying you are meaningless. They may be wrestling with their own pain, their own fears, their own confusion. And if, through your unique combination of cultural, societal, or genetic factors, you ever start to feel that way yourself, like the weight is too much, like the point is gone, like maybe you're the problem, please hear me. Those feelings are not a weakness. They are not the result of failure. They are a signal, a flashing light, a quiet inner voice saying, it's time to change what you take value in. And I promise you, that process is hard, but it doesn't have to be done alone. So reach out, ask for help, or at least ask to talk. In the description is a fantastic number where you may find guidance, because even if the universe doesn't hand us meaning, we can still hand it to each other. Let's keep the conversation going below. Whether you agree, disagree, or just want to be heard, you are welcome right here. Until next time, think, feel, act, repeat.